This is the Paranormal Podcast with Jim Harold.
Welcome to another edition of the Paranormal Podcast. You know, it's really fun getting back in the saddle. I've been recording shows, posting them, getting active on MySpace, and getting some good feedback on the new shows. And I just want to thank each and every one of you for sticking with us. You know, there were some long gaps between those missing shows, but now we're back, as you can see, and they're going to keep coming. And we've got a good one tonight, I think. My guest tonight is Lawrence R. Spencer. He is the author of a book called Alien Interview, and it's really a fascinating study about the Roswell Crash and the aftermath. And Mr. Spencer has written several books. He's written Alien Interview. He's written a book called The Big Bleep. He's written Pan God of the Woods, and also The Oz Factor. So it's a pleasure to have you, Lawrence Spencer. Thank you very much for taking time tonight.
Thanks, Jim. It's my pleasure.
So, you know, a kind of subculture and a kind of industry has grown up around the Roswell Crash. You know, I think probably everybody listening knows about that crash in 1947. You were mailed an interesting set of documents that kind of, I think, created this book or spawned this book. Can you tell us how you got introduced to this subject matter and what happened to get this book going?
Okay, as I mentioned in the pre-interview conversation that we had, I'm not actually the author of this material. I'm the editor in this case. Although I've written other books, in this case, the materials provided in the content of the book are not my creation. What I've done is edit the material. The way I came by this material is kind of an intriguing story in itself, and I try to cover that in the book as explicitly and accurately as possible. A brief overview is that in 1997 and 98, I was doing research for my first book called The Oz Factors, which is a nonfiction book which reviews the history of logic and thought processes in Western civilization and follows it through all the way to present time, and ultimately covers the subject of vested interests. Ultimately, I think everyone observes and would agree to some extent that everything that we do in our life is influenced or motivated to a greater or lesser degree by a vested interest for survival or against survival of something else or something along that line. That's most plainly seen in governments and religions and economic activities. People look out for themselves first and do things motivated by their own survival or the survival of their group or what have you. So that was the nature, that's essentially the nature of the Oz Factors book. And along that line, I got into the subject of ancient history and ancient archaeology and so forth. And as you know, there's lots of controversy and speculation about all kinds of things of that nature, you know, the pyramids, the Mayan culture, on and on and on. Subject to lots of conflicting opinions and alleged research and a number of vested interests tied up in that. The counterculture or alternative worldview researchers as opposed to the established academic vested interests that are funded by governments or other institutions that have to justify funding or paychecks. So in the course of my investigation and research into that kind of material, I ran across, as most everyone does, and I'm as interested in the next guy in aliens and the possible intervention of aliens in the affairs of Earth and the history of Earth and that sort of thing, and the subject of evolution and all of the related material. So along the course of that investigation, I was referred to a lady who's named in the book, who's the actual author of the materials, Matilda O'Donnell McElroy. And somehow, and I don't even remember how, back in 97 or 98, I called a phone number that I was given, and somebody told me that this lady had something to do with the Roswell Crash or Area 51 or something like that. They weren't sure. So just on a lark, I called, and she answered the phone. And I introduced myself and told her what I was doing and what I was trying to accomplish and the purposes for the book, the odds factors that I was writing. And she basically said, well, I don't have anything to tell you, but yes, I do know something about that, but I can't tell you what it is. So I talked to her basically about my project and what I was doing and so forth, and subsequently mailed her a copy of my book when it was published. And so 10 years later, sort of a long time, the only conversation I ever had with her was that one phone conversation for about 20 minutes, I think it was. So about 10 years later, last September, or August or September, I received a packet of materials in the mail, mailed from Ireland, from her. And I had really forgotten all about it. Anyway, the materials contained in the envelope I received were transcripts, according to the letter I received, transcripts of interviews conducted by her when she was a nurse in the United States Army Air Force. In 1947, she was stationed at the 509th Bomber Squadron in New Mexico, which is, the site of the Roswell Crash and so forth. And she alleges that these are copies of the transcripts of the interviews that she conducted at that time for the military. And she added a letter of introduction that she typed, and also descriptive notes to clarify certain portions of the transcripts and so forth. So what I did was I looked all that over, and I think anybody who reads the material will agree that it's pretty astonishing, to say the least, and to any average citizen, I would think pretty far-fetched. But, that's all subject to personal opinion and speculation and what have you. So I sat on the material for quite a few months ruminating about, whether this is what I should do with it, if anything. And if I were to do anything with it, what form it should take and so forth. So I also, during that time, tried to verify that this person actually existed, or get in contact with her, and so on and so forth, as I explain in the book. Basically, every lead or every trail that I had to contact her resulted in a dead end. The name that she supplied to me is a false name for reasons that become obvious to anyone who understands the sensitive nature of top-secret government documents, particularly in this case as regards alien activity and so forth. Anyway, long story short, I couldn't verify her existence, and ultimately determined that she had actually passed away, she and her husband both, in Ireland, several months, I guess. I tested that it was real paper in a real envelope, and that I received the documents. Beyond that, whether it's authentic, whether it came from a real person who was actually there at the time, I have absolutely no way of substantiating, except to the degree that I did talk to a lady 10 years ago on the phone for 20 minutes, from whom I assume is the source of the documents. But
now, go ahead.
It's credible to me to the degree that I can't discredit it, except by my own opinion. I mean, I have my own opinion about the content of the documents. Some of it seems rather outlandish to me, or just not quite logical or whatever. But again, it's my opinion, and my opinion is as good as your opinion or anyone else's opinion.
Now, in terms of the content, I think that one of the key questions and that people have about extraterrestrials, whether they believe in them or not, when they think of it, they think, well, if they do exist, are they benevolent, or do they have some evil purpose? What was your conclusion after looking through the documents?
Well, that's an excellent question. I was very intrigued to read the transcripts for that reason. Anyway, the transcripts, the interview transcripts state the agenda, the group, the organization of this particular alien very explicitly and very precisely. It's about as straightforward as you can get. And I don't know what to say except to read the transcripts. I don't, to try to answer your question, whether I personally think the message being communicated by the alien, in this case, whose name is, she says, is Airl, spelled A-I-R-L. It's a female-type entity. Doesn't inhabit a biological body. It inhabits a doll body. It's like a artificially simulated body that's made of whatever materials, but it's not biological in nature. Essentially, the being who inhabits and animates and operates the body is a spiritual being who has the ability to occupy the body or not at will and animate it, and in fact uses that body through which to operate the spacecraft itself directly through its own mental energies, whatever you care to call it. But to answer your question, whether or not their agenda is hostile or not, I would think that it's not, that their intentions are, as stated in the transcript, to safeguard the Earth, to prevent us or anyone else from destroying the Earth. But their intentions for maintaining the Earth in a stable, lasting fashion is a different question. I think it's pretty clear in the transcripts that they have their own future plans and agenda and reasons to be interested in the Earth and the solar system surrounding it as kind of a jumping off point in their invasion from other galaxies into this galaxy and beyond. They don't appear to be interested in this planet per se, or any of its resources or anything, and that becomes very, very plain when you read the full body of the transcripts and the whole story conveyed by the alien as to why they're here to begin with and what activities they've been engaged in and why, and so forth. That becomes very, very compelling, kind of alarming.
Yeah, well, actually, I was thinking of an analogy. It almost sounds like to me a developer of let's say a shopping mall. They're probably not that concerned about what happens to a particular anthill in that development, and if it survives, fine. If it gets in the way, fine.
Very much
doesn't
like
really
that,
matter.
yeah. Very much like that.
And I think in some ways,
did you ever read Douglas Adams' books?
I've looked at them a little bit, but not in depth.
Yeah, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's kind of an interesting thing. It starts out with a group of aliens who are the Galactic Construction Company, and they're just happen to be passing through the area building their hyperspatial tube or whatever, and Earth just happens to be in the way, so they blow it up, in the process. They on with construction. So it's almost like, that's kind of a comical premise, and Douglas Adams is a fantastic comical writer, but that would be the closest analogy I could think of to the point of view that the alien takes in conveying their intentions and the activities of what he refers to as refers to their activity as name of the entity is the domain, sort of like referring to their civilization at large, is the closest English translate word that the lady who did the interviews could use to describe the intent of the meaning of the word is the domain, and it's an expeditionary force for which he is or she is a pilot, an officer, and an engineer. It's all three of those roles. So I thought it was the reason it says in the transcripts that the spacecraft was in the area at all was because their overall mission as regards Earth is primarily to safeguard their interests in Earth and the solar system surrounding it. So they were investigating the fact that there was a lot of nuclear testing going on in New Mexico at that time, and in fact the 509th Bomber Squadron was the air group that dropped the bombs on Japan. So in Alamogordo testing grounds is about 100 miles away from there. So they were buzzing around looking at what's going on with all this atomic, this nuclear testing, which obviously would be very, if gotten let to go uncontrolled, would be very antipathetic to their interest in maintaining or preserving the planet for their own uses. So
now, is there any discussion in the book of a government cover-up, and if so, why was this covered up?
Well, according to the transcripts, it was very much covered up from day one. At the very, very highest levels down, for a very simple reason. The reason being that here the government has in its possession a living extraterrestrial being who is from a force that has tremendous technical and military capability far, far beyond anything ever imagined on Earth. A civilization that has existed for trillions of years, not thousands, millions, billions, but trillions of years. I thought one of the really interesting things in the transcripts is that the alien refers to the timeline of the events of the physical universe in terms of trillions of years, many, many trillions of years, and the existence of their own civilization and the evolution and development of their technology and technologies throughout the universe in terms of trillions of years, which is kind of interesting because obviously space or scientists on this Earth calculate the antiquity of Earth itself in terms of billions of years. 4.5 billion, I think, is the popular number, which is, I'm not sure exactly the reasons for the tremendous disparity in calculation of dates and orders of magnitude of dates, but I from my own study of it on the internet, it appears to me that the reason is because of the way we calculate the deterioration.
Go ahead.
That's all. Just kind of, to me, that idea of the essence of humanity, not just on Earth, but the essence of the nature of universes and the factors that cause the physical universe and spiritual universes to exist or be perceived at all emanate from the creative energy and ability to perceive that creation on the part of each of us individually and collectively as spiritual beings. And to me, that's a fairly revolutionary idea, for me anyway, at least in terms of Western culture, where it's popular to conceive that there really isn't an individual spiritual identity. There are gods, and then there's us, the lesser beings, who are very mortal, and we live painful lives, and we die, and when we're dead, that's it, So that the point of view is quite different than. It's more like it's probably more common in Eastern philosophy than it is in Western philosophy. But having studied some of Eastern philosophy, I do have some notion that that's kind of the essence of Hinduism, Buddhism, and various other things, which are also mentioned sort of in passing in the transcripts. But that's a whole ball of wax it is covered very in some detail in the transcripts, and I found that, for me personally, very compelling. Together with the idea that Earth is a prison planet, to me it explains lots of things that I've sort of always wondered about and never could quite resolve in my own mind. Well, why this and why that? And these things just don't add up. Historically, I've done a lot of reading about ancient archaeology and so forth, and how come we have a situation where a civilization like Egypt or the Maya or someone like that just seem to sort of appear in whole cloth out of nowhere, relatively speaking, and all of a sudden, within a very short span of time, there are these highly developed technical civilizations just sort of spring up out of the desert. In Mesopotamia or Egypt or wherever, and there doesn't seem to be any real traceable evolutionary progression. They just seem to, relative to the time track of the planet, they just seem to kind of appear overnight, relatively speaking. So that was one of the things that I thought was very interesting about it. That combined with the whole concept of the spiritual essence of people and the Earth being used as a prison planet for right up to this minute and for a very, very long time in the past, relative to written history on this planet.
Well, I think that this is all fascinating material, and I think if the transcript is authentic, it has tremendous implication for all of us. If it isn't authentic, it's still an interesting artifact. Either way, it's an interesting story. Lawrence, if they want...
go ahead and publish the material, because I really struggled with that for a long time. I went, well, there isn't any way I can authenticate this, and do I want to go out and put my life out there and become the champion of this material? And I don't... If somebody showed up on my doorstep today from the government and said, we understand you have copies of top secret transcripts, and I would say, absolutely, I do not. I never have, and I defy you to find it or prove that I ever received any such thing, and would totally claim that the whole thing is fiction and I made it up myself, with the exception that I would be giving myself a heck of a lot more credit for imagination than I actually have. I couldn't possibly dream this stuff up, I guarantee you.
Well, if people want to find out more, where on the internet can they go?
Well, there is a website for the book, alieninterview.org, and you can review the book on Amazon.com, and just type in Alien Interview and scan through the book. It's a searchable document, and also you can order it directly from the publisher, which is the best way to get it, fastest, cheapest way to get it, and that's from lulu.com, Lulu.com. So those are the three websites that you can refer to now. I mean, it's in the process of becoming available through most all bookstores and so forth.
And we will put a link to Amazon on the Paranormal Podcast page, so people can feel free to access it there as well. And Lawrence, I want to thank you very much for joining us. It's been a fascinating discussion, and I look forward to reading the book, as I'm sure many of our listeners do.
Well, good. I just would like to conclude by saying one thing, is that our discussion of the book is just, the very tip of the iceberg and barely scratched the surface. And again, I want to reemphasize that anything that I've said about it is really based on my personal opinion, which is irrelevant in the context of the material itself. And the only way to really, really experience the book, obviously, is to read the book. So, and draw your own conclusions and inferences and so forth. And again, I reiterate my whole position on publishing this material is that if it's true for you, it's true, and if it's not true for you, that's totally fine. It doesn't matter to me personally one way or the other. But I think the material has potential benefit to anybody who reads it, for what it's worth to them. So I encourage people to read it. I think you'll find it as interesting as I did.
Well, thank you again, Lawrence, and I want to take a special note to thank our listeners. They've stuck with us. We're quickly approaching our third anniversary, and really producing more content now. Very excited about this. A couple of ways that you can help us, and it would really be a great help to me personally, is if you could tell at least 5 friends who are interested in the paranormal about the Paranormal Podcast. The thing that we would like to see is more people listening to the program. We're getting great comments, and now that we're producing more regularly, please do tell 5 friends, and you don't have to tie them down. Just say, hey, give this show a listen if you're into the paranormal. One other big favor I have from our listeners is that on our page now, paranormalpodcast.com, at the top of the page, there's a banner for a survey. We are considering taking ads on the program. There has been some interest, and they would be very non-intrusive. But we want to make sure if we do that we make them targeted to our audience, that we make them ads that will appeal to our audience. And by way of doing that, we're asking people to fill out a survey. All you have to do is click on that banner. It'll take you probably about 5 minutes, if that, to fill it out. And that would be a great personal favor to me if you did that. As always, you can contact us at paranormalpodcast@gmail.com if you have questions, complaints, concerns, or just want to say hi. Also, we have a new MySpace page, and the details on that are also at paranormalpodcast.com. Thanks so much to Lawrence. Thanks so much to you for listening to another edition of the Paranormal Podcast, and we'll be back real soon with another show.